Rotter Tube Reef, saltwater aquarium care with Steve Rotter.
Hello and welcome to Reef Talk. I'm Scott Anderson, and I'm here today with Steve Rotter of Rotter Tube Reef. And today we're going to talk about our experience keeping clownfish. Clownfish are incredibly fun fish, and we've both kept them for quite a long time. And we know a lot of you have lots of questions about them, and we've both been getting lots of questions about clownfish. So we're just going to kind of talk about our experience with them. So I started keeping clownfish 10 years ago. My clownfish Nemo is now almost 11 years old.
That's awesome.
And it's fantastic. He's my first fish. He's been with me for 11 years, hangs out in my 210-gallon tank. So these guys can live a long time. They're great, fantastic fish to keep. And then, Steve, I think you did the same thing. Your first fish was a clownfish, wasn't it?
That's right. Those are the guys who really pushed me into getting into the hobby. I don't know. I think most people seem to gravitate towards the clownfish more. I don't know why, but I did. And that was my first. I had to have them. I just had to have them. And that's what really got me into the hobby.
Well, I mean, it makes sense why you'd want clownfish. They're relatively inexpensive as far as saltwater fish goes. They're really hardy and easy to take care of. And they're tank-bred. So the majority are tank-bred anymore. So you're not pulling stuff from the reef. So you feel good about that.
Right.
So there's a lot going for them. They can be kept in smaller tanks. I mean, clowns can really be kept in something as small as a 10-gallon for a long time. Although I have seen ocellaris clownfish that are like 4 inches long. I mean, they do get really big. But I mean, these are really old fish. My 10-year-old clownfish female still only 3 inches or so.
Okay, so that's the 11-year-old?
Yeah.
About 3 inches?
Yeah, it's not that big. I mean, it's...
Well, that's a good size. My female, that is maybe, I don't know, a year and a half, is 3 inches.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with fish, my understanding the way it works with their growth patterns is when they're young, they grow really fast, and as they get older, their growth slows. So it would be expected that you'd get that 2-3 inch fish pretty quickly. To get to the 4 inch plus fish is going to take a long time. So there's a lot of species out there. Personally, I've only kept ocellaris. I know you've got something else. What else do you have, Steve?
I've got a snowflake, 2 Da Vinci's, and a maroon.
And the snowflakes and the Da Vinci's, those are just really fancy ocellaris, right?
Right. They look... Here's a photo of one now. They look like puzzle shape, if you will. They breed different types of the clownfish, the ocellaris, and I can't remember what else, but I'm sure you guys will let us know in the comments, unless, Scott, you might know.
Hercules are very popular.
Yes, and they see what they can come up with. I believe that the Da Vinci's were first, and then the Picassos were second, but then there's different degrees of them. There's the Da Vinci A, B, and C being more complex shapes. The C being more intricate, almost puzzle-like. And they were always more expensive when I started to get into the hobby. And the clowns, being that they look awesome, and as Scott said, they're relatively cheap, still expensive, around $30 a fish.
Well, when I say clowns are relatively cheap,
well, yeah,
I'm talking about regular ocellaris or perks. You go into the fancy clowns, you can spend as much money as you want.
Yeah, and then you get to the purple tangs, like, what, 150, something like that? Average,
yeah, but I mean,
whatever. That's why they're cheaper.
You can spend over $500 on a clownfish.
Yes, you could, yeah.
They're out there, I mean, and a lot of people do it.
Yeah, and so I was looking at around the $30 range, and that was still pricey. I thought, $30. Well, I gotta have two. That's $60, $60 right now. Well, that's coming from someone who's not been in the hobby, right? Because then you start to see the prices of other things, and hobbies are usually in increments of $50. Like my guitar stuff is in the increments of 100, which anyway. But yeah, so I started with those guys, and then later on, I had to have the Da Vinci because they look like art, and they're very laid back and calm, as most clowns are, unless you introduce more than a pair in a tank, which is the reason why Scott and I wanted to do this video for you guys, because Scott has had great success with keeping multiple. Now, you can surf all the forums you want, and they're all going to say the same thing. Never put more than a pair of clownfish in a tank. And I agree with that. However, I didn't follow that rule. Neither did Scott. And I was coming to him a lot, like, are you sure? Are you sure it's okay to do it? So if it doesn't work out, you know whose fault it's going to be. So
yeah.
How did you... I know you did a video recently on more than a pair of clownfish in your 210-gallon. So I know you did a video on it, but since we're here together, just kind of give us a little synopsis on that.
So I'll go a little more in depth in the video than I did in that video, because I've had tons of questions on this lately. But I never planned on having more than a pair of clownfish in my tank. I was just planning on two. But then a buddy at work was breaking down his tank, and it was kind of one of those deals where you buy everything or nothing, right? So with that came a pair of clownfish. So for a while I had them down in my sump because I didn't want to put them in the display. And after, a month or two in there, I decided I'm going to try it. I'm going to put them in. And I put the new pair in there. And it was interesting because the two pairs split up. They decided that they were going to switch mates, I guess. So the two that were already existing, Nemo and Kooky, they split up, and then the biggest, which I thought was a female like the other one, became the male to Nemo. Now, just in case you're wondering, clownfish can go from male to female. They're all born males, but they will never go back from female to male. So once they're a female, they're done changing sexes. So apparently he was still a male, as that pair was. So he switched off, went with Nemo, and they produce eggs like every 2 weeks now in my tank. And then the other pair lives in my clam, clear on the other side of the tank. And they've been doing this for 2 years plus now. And it's never been a problem. I've never had any aggression whatsoever. And like I said in the video, I don't actually do anything. I just have a big tank. And really, I think you need about 2 feet per pair of clownfish. If you look at my tank, it's 3 feet. And really, that 2 feet space seems to be kind of their swimming range as to where they go. That middle of the tank, nobody's really hanging out in. I would guess I could probably throw another pair in there, but I really don't want to risk that because I've kind of got some nice balance going on right now.
Yeah, you have the 4, right?
Right, I've got 4. And they're just regular Ocellaris. They're nothing special, nothing fancy. Now, it's interesting because I would be willing to bet, and I've seen some people do harem tanks where they put like 25 clowns, and you start off as a juvenile, where they start off as juveniles, right, and then they come up and they have tons of anemones in there. They feed it well, and for the most part, I think that works pretty good. And that's another way of doing it. I haven't tried it, so I can't guarantee that it's going to work for you. But that's one thing. But if you look at wild clownfish, they're interesting because you're not going to see just a pair of clownfish in an anemone usually. Usually there'll be multiples. And that biggest female will be breeding with the next biggest fish, which will be the male. And then the other ones are just kind of living in there, hoping that one of the other two will die so it can take its place. So when the female dies, the biggest male becomes the female, the next biggest fish takes its place. I would be willing to bet with the right conditions that we as reefers can duplicate that. I haven't tried it. That's just kind of some theory, but you see the documentaries on it and stuff, so I would bet that it's possible to duplicate that. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of what's going on with that harem tank thing that's going on right now. Those are really cool.
Those are really cool, yeah. Unfortunately, I would, and I think, as you said, it is best if you introduce them at the same time. So if you wanted 20, you're looking at $600.
Yep. That's how you do it, though.
If they're $30. So, what I was going to say, I have... Now, as I said, I was talking to you about... okay, so what I did was I really wanted the Da Vinci and the Picasso, but I have a pair of Ocellaris clowns in my 125-gallon, which is 6 feet long. Now, you've got the large tank, and you always said it's fine to put them in there, and I was very nervous because when I introduced my second clown to my first, because the male passed away, it was a really bad fight. They had locked by the jaws, and they were shaking each other up, as you'd see a crazy dog shaking up something that it just killed. And I really thought I had to pull them out, separate them. I kept them in there together. After about 5 minutes, it was fine. They've been inseparable ever since. Not keeping that in mind, I didn't want to put any more clownfish in there because, you can imagine what's going to happen, especially when everyone says keep no more than a pair because they're highly territorial. I've had some clownfish before when I'd stick my hand in the tank, they'd attack me. It doesn't hurt. They just rush up and peck your hand really quick to say, hey, this is my area. And, that's really about it. So what I did was I went out and I found a JBJ 45 on sale, 45 gallon, to have as my clown tank. And you know what? 2 tanks is really difficult. I know I'm going into more detail here, but man, I was talking with Scott and CJ and Michael from Aaron's Aquariums, and he said they all say the same thing. 2 tanks is difficult, and it is, because if you're going to clean,
it is.
You're going to clean one, you do your water change, maybe you'll scrub the algae off the glass if you've got some, you're going to vacuum your sand, do whatever else, change out your mechanical filtration. It's like, okay, I'm done. It's like 30 minutes, maybe an hour later, depending how much you put into it. Now I got to do the second tank. It's like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I thought, okay, my guys are in quarantine. I just took them out of quarantine, and the decision last night was, do I put them back in the JBJ 45 or do I put them in the 125? I put them in the 125. And my original Ocellaris pair, the female is 3 inches, the male is 2.5. They're always hosting the upper right-hand corner. And then these guys, the 4 of them, 2 Da Vincis, a Picasso, 2 Picassos, a Da Vinci, a Picasso, a Snowflake, and a Maroon. All different, and they were hosting the upper left. Well, within 5 minutes, the 3-inch Ocellaris zoomed over to say, what the hell's going on here? And everybody's cool. It's like they all want to play together. My Maroon is nice. Little baby, and he's hanging out at the bottom by himself. I feel bad for him, but anyway, that's my story. We'll see what happens. I'm sure there's haters out there who are going to say, that's a mistake. Well, Scott's been doing it for a long time. And you know what? Yes, keep in mind the clowns are highly territorial, but in the end, it depends on the fish. So, my opinion, I think if you want to have the courage, or if you want to risk putting the fish together, that's 80% of the battle right there.
Yeah.
And then sure they can turn on each other, but I don't think so. Like, I've got too many tangs in my tank maybe, and they all get along perfectly. No aggression. People say the fox face can be aggressive at times, territorial. Rarely, never seen any aggression from him. Anyway, that's what I'm doing. What am I going to do with the 45? I don't know yet. Either I'm going to break it down and sell it, or keep it in storage for a bit, or I'm going to keep it as a coral only tank, which...
Yes, coral QT tank would be brilliant.
Yeah, and then, like 2 or 3 months after I buy a zoanthid or whatever, 3 months, throw it in the 125. So, like you said, that'd be a great quarantine tank.
Brilliant.
Plus, while it's quarantining, it'll be on display in the living room. So I'll have...
Be awesome.
corals, yeah. So what I can do is, keep a whole bunch of nice corals in there maybe, and slowly transfer them to the 125, and as they split or I frag them, I can put them back to the JBJ 45. I don't know, it's a plan.
And if you do end up having problems with your clowns, you can put them back into that tank. So you've got a backup option, which is something that's important when you're going to start pushing the limits of what you can do. Is you need that backup option.
That's a good idea too, yeah. And it would be great. Like, that's a really great point. Let's say that I bought a coral and a week went by or 2 weeks went by, and then, there was massive fighting and I threw him in the tank. Well, what if there's ick that came in with that coral?
Yep.
Now there's a chance, if there is, that fish will get it. So
Yep.
With that said, I gotta just make sure that I don't put fish in there until it's been 6 weeks.
Right.
So I have to have my quarantine tank of 10 gallons up and running.
I'm just thinking worst case scenario, if you've got to pull those fish out because of your aggression issues, that you've got a backup. So I think it's interesting, though, the way the aggression works with clowns, because I saw no aggression out of my clownfish till they started laying eggs. And then once they started laying eggs, the aggression was towards starfish.
Towards starfish?
Don't ask me why, but they killed, I gotta think, at least 3, maybe 4 starfish. They killed both of my Lynchias. No, they killed 4 starfish. Yeah, they killed both of my Lynchias. They killed one of my serpents and one of my brittle stars. I don't know if the starfish are a predator of the eggs or what, but if a starfish gets close to those clownfish, they will tear the crap out of it. And it's just the starfish that they don't like.
You're probably right. It's probably some kind of predator against the eggs, And
they lived together for like 2 years, fine, not a problem. Then when they started laying eggs, they started tearing into the starfish.
Were the starfish at any point, as far as you know, close to those eggs?
Well, no, that's when. So it's when they get into that territory that they've set up. Those clownfish defend that, right? And then they've actually got a video of one of my starfish getting its butt kicked. It was sad to see it, but it's kind of how I figured out that it was my clowns that ended up killing my starfish. My wife's like, yeah, I saw this a week or 2 ago, and I filmed it. It's like, oh crap! Well, that's what it was.
Oh man.
So man, yeah, I lost my starfish, and I won't buy more because I'm pretty sure they'll go to that corner and get their butts kicked.
Oh man. So how many did you lose?
It was 4 total. I've still got a couple. I guess they're staying away from that side.
Oh man.
But yeah, so they can be aggressive. They have their territories, and it's not going to be just against other fish, because like you said, they'll bite the person when they try to put their hand in the tank. Mine don't bite me, but I know CJ from CJ's Aquariums pulled fish out because he was tired of every time he stuck his hand in the tank getting attacked.
Yeah, right. And it doesn't hurt, but it's just that it's that annoyance. Like you never know when it's going to happen. You're moving around, and all of a sudden you feel that on your arm, and it doesn't bother you, but it's annoying. Yeah, I know. My female, Da Vinci, that just went into 125, when she was in the JBJ 45, before she went into quarantine, I was getting that all the time from her. I could not even feed them. And I think after a week and a half or so, she realized, oh, when I see this hand, I am eating. So I think, because after about a week and a half, she kind of stopped,
Now, with aggression, there's different types of clownfish out there, and I've only kept Ocellaris. I can't speak too much up to it, but by reputation at least, the Ocellaris and the Percula starfish are, by reputation, the least aggressive, and your maroons and clarkies and stuff like that get really aggressive. So before you decide you're going to keep clownfish, I would really research the type you want to keep. Pretty much Ocellaris perks you can keep with just about anything. You start getting into some of the more exotic types, you're really going to want to look into that. And then my understanding, you can speak more to this, is your fancy clownfish like the Da Vinci's and the snowflakes and all that, they're basically just regular ocellaris, so they're going to have the same behaviors, just with much prettier color pattern. Is that what been your experience, Steve?
Yeah, exactly. That's been my experience. I've heard that the Da Vincis and the Picassos can be a little more aggressive than the ocellaris, and it's true. They are. The Picasso in particular, it's more of a little runt. One of the newer ones, yeah, the food drops and he chases the other ones away. The Da Vinci as well, but not as bad. They're very high strung, if you will. Not crazy, but just more high strung. Whereas the ocellaris and just kind of checking things out, just kind of existing, being peaceful. The other guys are more high strung and a little more. Who's that? Where's that guy going? That's what they're like. So, yeah, and if you add territorial into that, it's going to be bad.
And I don't know for certain, but I'd be willing to bet that if you were to buy tank-bred clownfish, that you're going to have less issues with territorialism than if you buy capped or wild-caught clownfish.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
I'd be willing to bet that. I mean, it's just the tank-bred ones grow up in a tank environment. They spend their whole life with the aquarium setting. They're brought up with lots of other clownfish. My guess is that you almost train them that way, where if you bring a wild clownfish in that's already 5 years old or whatever, it's already set in its ways.
Yeah, that's true. The Da Vinci and Picasso that I got and the Snowflake, they were all tank-bred. There's a local breeder, and I bought them from a reef store that my brother goes to once in a while. That's pretty good. It's a mom and pop store. They do a really good job and do a good job with the quarantining. Never had any issues with them. And these clowns, I can't speak for the rest of their fish, but these clowns, they have a supplier who's local, and they breed out of their house.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
and that's actually one.
They're
of the
more laid back, but yet they're still a little, because they're going to be clowns, and they're going to be a little territorial. Yeah. But for the most part, they're great.
But that's actually really cool, right? Not all of your tank-bred clowns are coming from some exotic place. A lot of them are just done by other hobbyists in the local area and turned into pet stores or whatever. That's really cool. People are doing that. Yeah,
right. So, I thought about this for weeks, actually. And then I decided to get that JBJ 45. And I still love that tank, don't get me wrong. I love the JBJ all-in-ones or the Red Sea Reefer. They're great, yeah. But I'm just saying 2 tanks.
I know.
So it's like, do I want to sacrifice these guys possibly and risk it because I spent more money on them? Not too much more because they were lower price and they had 25% off when I got them for 4th of July. So it doesn't matter how much you spend really, but in the end it's still a life, and I didn't want to sacrifice their lives. But it was to the point where I could not do the 2 tanks. It was just too much, and I took the chance. In the end, you got to just decide to or not, and I just decided to. Watching them, knowing I was going to pull them out instantly, I was going to sit in front of that tank for an hour, if need be. Granted, that something could happen when I go to bed. I watched them for a few hours on and off. This morning, they were still very good. Before we started recording this show now, the next day, still very good. So I'm confident. Anything can happen, but I've made it past the most difficult part, so that's good.
Yeah. Now, the fun thing about clowns is there's so many different directions you can go. There's so many species of it, and there's no way we can cover all of this in here. You've got the anemone hosting that goes fantastic with them. They're pretty hit or miss on the tank-bred ones as to how easily they're going to host the anemone. You can breed them. I've heard of people breeding different species together, which gets weird. So, there's so many possibilities with clownfish that it's a huge subject. And on this show, we're only going to be able to cover just that little tiny piece of it.
That's right. And I do have a bubble tip rose anemone, which is beautiful. It is in the JBJ 45. I'm going to be moving it into the 125. That's going to be awesome. Where there are 3 pairs of clownfish. And I bring that up because Scott reminded me what he just said. You don't need an anemone. You don't need it. They don't need to host it. It's not required. If you have clownfish, they don't need it. Don't think that you need to go out and learn all about anemone care and all this stuff. If anemones bother you because they can be toxic, if, God forbid, they get sucked into a motor, power head, something, devastation to your tank, they can fight with each other.
Walk around, sting corals.
Yeah, so if that bothers you, as it bothers all of us, you don't want to get involved in it. You don't have to, because clownfish do not require that.
And if you want to, it's absolutely an awesome symbiotic relationship that's out there. But it's not necessary for these guys.
Right. And it will take a while to host, so don't think if you buy an anemone, they're going to just go into it right away. Yeah, I've heard it taking months.
Mine are interesting because they're much more territorial than they are anemone-driven. So if there's an anemone in their area, they'll host it. But if they're not, they won't bother to seek one out. Interesting.
You know what? There was my first anemone that I had. My guys are always in the upper right rear corner of the tank where the return is coming. The anemone was maybe 4 inches below that. Never paid it attention. They didn't care.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of those frustrating things. If you want that symbiotic relationship, it's not always easy to get.
No.
A lot of people say they can just introduce them right to the anemone. That's probably a good idea, but it's still pretty hit or miss as to whether it'll actually take.
Yeah, you can train them. I believe Mark with Melev's Reef, he introduced them by sliding them down a PVC pipe.
It was an acrylic tube. It was really cool. You can watch the video of each one going in. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, check that out. And at the end of the tube, there's a anemone. So when they hit it, they're just kind of there, and they just, hey, look at this. And it just kind of happens. It's a great way to introduce them. I'm not going to do anything like that.
No.
I'm just going to put the anemone in the tank because I love it. And what happens, happens. If they never host it, I'm fine with that. If they do, icing on the cake. That's going to be great.
And then different species of clowns host different anemones. So you got to figure out which species of clown you're getting and put it with the right kind of anemone. So it's a whole nother thing to think about when you're purchasing your clown anemone combo.
Right. I had a Haitian anemone. Those are dangerous. It died, and I'm fine with that. I hate to say it, but I just kind of am because they're a predator. They're dangerous. Clowns don't host them. They could, but they're just not known for doing it. The bubble tip rose anemone is one of the better ones for the hosting.
For the Ocellaris and Perks, they're fantastic.
Yeah.
But I can't speak to the rest of them, but I do know that you need different anemones for different clownfish. I wouldn't go out and buy a Clarkie expecting it to go to a rose without researching it first.
Yeah.
It may or may not. You got to look into that kind of stuff. I just don't know.
An interesting fact that you guys may or may not know, the clowns are immune to the sting of the anemone, so that's why they live in there for protection. And then the clowns also will, this would be cool to see if my guys ever host it, the clowns actually bring the anemone food and they feed it. That's neat.
Yeah, and the anemone will also feed off of the clown's waste. So when it goes to the bathroom, the anemone will actually feed off of that too, which is an interesting form of feeding.
That's messed up. Hey,
but that's part of it. I mean,
yeah, that's great. So it would be great
symbiosis.
If my anemone split and I had 2 of them. That I'm really looking forward to that. And then if the clowns would host it, that would be great.
That'd be cool.
I love the anemones. So
yeah, I've got just one left in my display, and the rest are down in my frag tanks.
What kind is it? Is it the bubble?
I've got Rose up in the display, and ever since the biopellet incident's not doing very good, and then I've got 2 roses down in my frag tank, and then I've got 2 long tentacles down there, and I think I still have a Sabea. I haven't seen it in a while, but there's a lot of water flow, so I got to look for it.
How big, like average? I know you said you have some minor issues now with your large tank, but on average, how large is that, the rows in there?
So the biggest rows I had just split. It was probably 6-8 inches, right? And it split, so now it's more like 4 inches, and then it's got a smaller clone that's like 2.5 inches.
Nice. How long were the tentacles average?
It just depends on how it was feeling, because sometimes it would bubble up and other times they'd be nice and long. But they weren't the real super long ones like you've seen.
Yeah.
They were shorter.
When you say shorter, how long would you say?
I don't know, 3 inches.
3 inches. That's pretty good. That's good.
But I'm sure you've seen some of the videos where you got these tentacles coming out 8-10 inches.
Yeah.
Crazy long. It wasn't something like that.
Yeah, those are awesome. Now, are those special kind of?
There are so many different types of anemones, and even within the rose bubbles, you'll have some that have green in them, just different variants. There'll be more like burgundy varieties. There's just so many types out there, and I don't know how much of it's a species variant or how much of it's just like different color varieties, patterning, and then just the lighting affects how these things look, and water flow and water quality. It's really hard to know how much is species related, at least for me. I haven't researched it enough to really know that.
Same with me. That's why I'm asking. I didn't know if like the rose bubble tip, if it was, it's like, oh, you didn't get this kind, you didn't get the B version, so that's why you're going to be stuck with 3-inch long tentacles.
There is different types, and I know people will definitely pay a premium for certain color variants. But that being said, by the time you change your lighting, you may not have that color variant when you're done.
Right. Like Mark's, Milov's Reef, you've seen his anemone video. It's
fantastic.
Tentacles are like long. They're like
a
foot long. I don't know what that is, but beautiful. It's awesome.
It's fantastic.
Now, real quick, I think it's a good place to wrap up.
Yep.
If you wanted to move your anemone, now mine doesn't move much, but I am going to be taking it out of the 45 and putting it into the 125. And the bottom of the anemone has a foot. You don't want to tear it. I've heard people kind of put ice around the bottom. How would you get it off the rock? Or I could take that big Pucani rock. I would just rather not put the rock in my tank. I could, but.
So ideally, you want to catch it while it's moving. The two I took out of my tank, that's how I did it.
Yeah.
I stuck my hand in, just kind of felt the foot. It didn't want to come off. I left it, and then that was my anemone attempted suicide video, because I look and I find the little clone like sucked into the pump. It didn't go through. It's just like sitting on the grill, stuck to it. It was all deflated and everything. I figured it was going to die, but it lived. It was fine. And then I went and felt the other one. It just fell right off in my hand. So, ideally, you're going to just find loose like that. You can just put them in. But more than likely, it's going to be stuck pretty tough to whatever you're on. So the idea is you can massage the foot, you can put ice on it. But the thing is every time you attempt to move that anemone, you risk ripping that foot.
Yeah.
If you rip the foot, it's likely to die. So for your highest success rate, like in your situation, I just take that whole rock out, put it in your new tank, let it walk off of that rock, because odds are once it goes in your new tank, it's not going to be happy where you put it, and it's going to walk around and find its new home.
Yeah, that was the plan. No way would I attempt to take it off the rock.
Yeah, I've only attempted it once, and I killed that anemone, so...
The only thing I could think of is, like you said, wait till it moves and not use my finger, but just... maybe put like a piece of rock next to where it is, so if it moves onto that rock, I can just take it and like a small bit of rock, like a flat piece. Do that.
I know people who are really good at this and have the technique down. That's not me.
Yeah.
So unless you have that and you know how to do it, or you're willing to gamble with your anemone, I would just not mess with it.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm not. I was curious, but I'm just going to put that whole rock in there. I'll do a little aquascape arrangement and add one more rock. I don't want to, but I will. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait for the nitrates to get lower before I do that move.
That's probably a good idea.
All right. So I guess that's all we have.
This is great, yeah.
This was a good one.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to be on Reef Talk, Scott and I will talk with you, obviously, because you're not going to do it by yourself. Think of a topic. Get a hold of us. Instant message. Send Scott a message on his YouTube channel, or just put a comment in this video or on mine, whatever. And basically, you just need Skype. That's how we do it. We don't stream
I
it
want to
live.
emphasize that because we've tried a couple of times not using Skype, and it's just too hard. Whatever we do, you need to have a PC and Skype.
Yeah, PC or a Mac with Skype. Obviously, a webcam or a built-in camera.
Thanks for watching. Please click the subscribe button for more videos.